This process is going to take a little bit of time, but if you want to make a really good junk journal, don't be in a hurry. Take the time and watch my steps. Like, I've broken this whole tutorial down into little bite-sized pieces. So if you already know about the printing, you can skip this part. If you don't, you can get some tips from the printing section. And you can move straight on to cutting out the cover. If you already know what sort of cover you want, skip that step and go straight to how I sew my signatures into the fabric piece. You can get whatever part out of this tutorial that you want. But if you need help all the way through, just go step by step and follow each step in sequence. Do it from start to finish and you'll be able to make this journal too. I'm Donna from Australia, and today's tutorial is a fabric journal cover, which is part 3 of my journal cover series. To make the cover, I used this Amity Bloom digital cover and I printed it on 167 GSM matte photo paper, and then I glued it on top of a piece of Kraft-Tex. I used the 𝗀𝗵𝗶𝗀 fabric glue, and the Kraft-Tex I used the colour chocolate. Now, I've already done a video on how to do this, so I don't need to double up and do it again today. I've added the link in the description box below so you can follow along on how to do this gold trim. But today I am going to show you how to cut the Kraft-Tex and size your cover so you can follow along and make this fabric cover journal with me today. Now I'm going to give you some tips about printing this digital cover. I'm using an Epson matte photo paper, but I want to show you what can happen if you change the settings in your printer. Right, so first off, I'm going to put it on landscape and shrink to fit. Before I print it, I'm going to click here on more settings. You can see that I've got my output quality on high quality. Now, if I go up here to paper type and I change the setting to photo quality, which is the same as matte. If you haven't got matte, use photo. Look what happens. When I print this out, the colour turns into a brown colour. But look at this one. I've used exactly the same printer and exactly the same paper. The only difference is when I go into more settings, the output quality stays on high quality and the paper type, I left it on plain paper. I did not change it to the photo or the matte paper. It has a huge impact when you change the paper type. So if you put a cardstock in there, don't change the paper type, leave it on plain paper and just print it on high quality, because this will happen. You'll get 2 different colors. And to add one more scenario, this might not even happen on your printer. It could turn out entirely different because every printer is different. The cutting out is pretty simple. It's straightforward because I'm using a sheet of Kraft-Tex. This Kraft-Tex happens to be an 8.5 by 11 size, but my Amity Bloom printed cover is an A4 size. But I'm still going to work with it. So I cut around the edge of my pretty cover, and then I'm going to separate the front from the back. So I'm going to measure smack bang in the center of these 2 covers, and I'm going to cut down the middle and separate them. Then I sit them back on top of my sheet of Kraft-Tex. You could be using cardboard, whatever you've got. And of course, I decided to change colors. To make this easier, I'm going to measure in the middle of my Kraft-Tex and cut it in half. And then I'm going to make my border edge equal around the front of my pretty cover. All I have to do is trim off a tiny bit at the bottom. If you look at this now, you could pretty much leave it like this, but I'm trimming off a tiny bit at the bottom. You have multiple choices here. You can glue this pretty cover right on your cardboard or Kraft-Tex. You can glue it down just like this, or you can tack it with a little bit of glue and use your sewing machine and stitch it on. That would look beautiful as well. Or you can go back to my video that I've put the link in the description box below, and you can add some gold trim to it just like this. The fabric I use for this journal is an upholstery fabric. This is an old cushion that I pulled apart. So you want something that's of medium to heavy weight. This is a piece I got from the charity shop. It cost me $1. This is also a heavy upholstery fabric. What you want to be looking for is something that looks as good on the inside of the fabric as it does on the outside, because we are going to be seeing both sides of this fabric. So this is the inside, and I'm going to be using the inside of the fabric, and you're going to see it like this here on the outside. Here's another piece. This piece isn't that heavy, but it's giving you an idea how good it looks on both sides. This one as well, it's an upholstery piece from Spotlight in Australia. It looks good on both sides. And this is another gem that I picked up from the charity shop here in Australia, and it's a fabric swatch, and it's also a heavy upholstery fabric. It's perfect because both sides look great. So I'm going to use this piece here. This side is what you're going to see on the outside, which matches my cover, and the light side is what you're going to see on the inside of the journal. The fabric piece is going to be my cover. It's also going to be the spine. It's also going to be the inside piece of my cover. So it's going to be an all-in-one. So I've got to cut it off so I can get the maximum piece out of it. And then I want to make it the same height as my cover. So I cut off my top line first, and then I lay my cover on that line. Now I'm using a friction pen. This pen can be used on fabric. When you mark the fabric and then put an iron over it, the heat removes the mark that you've placed on the fabric. So I'm going to mark the height of my journal and then cut it off. Now I'm going to leave the full width here, and I'm not going to trim the width until I finish sewing in my signatures and then glued the covers in place. So this is how it should look by now. The fabric piece needs to be the same height as the cover, and at the moment it's a little bit too wide. So we've got the front, the spine, and the back piece all in one. Now we're going to pre-pierce the sewing holes. I've provided a template, and there are going to be 5 signatures in this journal. So there are 5 rows. It makes it a lot easier when you've got a template. You do not have to work out where your holes need to be placed in your fabric. I also want to point out at this time that whatever size cover you use is going to dictate the size of your pages. So if your pages are a little bit taller than my template, just cut it out like this. So cut it out from the top of the paper all the way down the bottom, and just use the width of the hole placements, and then put your template on your cover like this, and then just cut it out where the cover ends. So you'll just use a little bit more paper like I'm doing here. So your holes need to be even at the top and the bottom. So the one with the most holes in it is for your fabric cover, and the ones with one row of hole in it is for your paper pages. So just cut that paper pages one out and put it aside. Now bring your fabric piece back in, and on the inside facing up, put a little mark right in the center at the top and a little mark right in the center at the bottom. With the wrong side facing up, put the center of your whole template on the center line that you just marked on your fabric piece, both on the top and the bottom. Now once you've got this in place, get a piece of washi tape or painter's tape, something with a very low tack. You don't want it to pull any fibers out of your fabric. So just tape it down and make sure you don't put any tape over your holes. We're going to sew the signatures directly onto this fabric piece, so you'll need an awl. You can use a bookbinder's awl, a pokey tool, or a clay tool, whatever you've got. Grab your awl and just pierce straight through the paper and your fabric piece. Now you'll see here, as soon as you pull your awl out, the hole in the fabric just closes up, and that's because you're not actually punching a hole. When you pull the awl out, the hole just closes back up. So this is where your friction pen comes in handy. So push the awl in the hole, turn it over, and where the hole comes out on the back side here, use your friction pen to mark the hole. Don't go too crazy with it. Don't mark it too dark. Right, now do that on all of your holes. Go all the way through the whole lot of them. Even though we've pierced the holes now, we're going to do them again when we sew in the pages. Now to get your pages ready, we're doing 5 signatures. That's 7 folded pages in each signature. That's going to give you 35 pages in total. Front and back, 70. That's 70 gorgeous pages to write in or glue in. This part here is so you know what size paper to get together for your journal. We're going to be sewing these pages right on this piece of fabric here. So the spine of your paper will start from the very left-hand side of your cover. So if you fold a piece of paper in half, and this pink piece here is folded in half, so it's our page, then you just lay it over the top of your cover and put a mark to the right-hand side of it where you want it to fall on the inside of your cover, and then you just cut it off. So if you want it closer to the edge of your cover, cut it a little more to the right. If you want it a little bit further inside your cover, place it more to the left. And then just use this as your guide to gather all of your other papers. When I put my cover back behind my page, you can see I've got a little gap at the top, the bottom, and the right-hand side of my cover, so my page will always remain inside my cover. I've gathered 35 pieces of paper and folded them in the center. They're all pretty much the right height. I've used A4 paper, and that's what I use to print my cover. So I know they're going to fit inside that cover. Some of them are too wide for my cover, but I deal with that after I start putting them in my little stacks. So what I'm doing here is I'm making 5 little piles, and each of these piles are going to have 7 pieces of folded paper in them, which is 5 signatures. And once I've got that group of papers together, I put them all inside each other like I'm doing right now. This can be a lengthy process. If you're as fussy as I am, I put a piece of paper in and then I'll move it around. I've got 5 piles here to do, so I'm not going to make you watch me do the whole lot of it. I'm going to put a few pieces in. I'm going to move them around a bit in this one signature, and then I'm going to do the others off camera but when I'm finished, you'll be able to see the final flip through. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just picking up one signature. This is the signature that I've picked out to go in the very front of my journal because I like the way it looks with the inside of the fabric. Now I'm going to bring my cover in, and I'm going to use my cover to size my first signature correctly, like especially the width. So my first signature is going to be the guide for the other 4 signatures. So I've cut off this width here, and I know it's a coffee dyed piece of paper, so I can use the full height. And then I'm going to put my other pages back inside, and I know anything that's hanging out to the right or above it need to be trimmed off. I'll take out this page here because it's way too tall. So I'm going to take off the height of this page so that it matches the height of the front of the signature. And then I'm going to trim the width of all of the pages together. And they'll all match the front of the front page here where the lady is on the front. And then I'll just put my ruler on it and cut them all off together. Putting the cover back on this first signature, you can see it just sits behind it. You can't see the pages. This is the way I want it. I don't want the pages hanging out. Now I'm going to use this signature as a guide to cut the second signature and so on. I'll cut all the other 4 using the first signature as my guide. Now here's my 5 signatures all done and ready to sew onto the fabric. Here's the part you've all been waiting for. We're going to sew the signatures directly onto this piece of fabric. I'm not using any reinforcement. I'm sewing them straight onto this one piece of medium to heavy weight upholstery fabric. I've got my 5 signatures here, and I'm going to start sewing from the back. So the last signature is the signature I'm going to sew in first. The best way to do this is to pick them up with your first signature facing you and turn them over so that the front signature is laying down on your left side, and turn the next one on top of it, and so on and so on. And the 4 signatures on your left, just push them over, and the last signature on your right is the one we're going to sew in first. It's facing the right way up, but it is signature number 5. So I've got my holes here. So I'll label it front and back, and this is signature number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So each line represents where we're sewing in a signature. I'm going to sew this signature on line number 5. So this is where you'll need to bring back in your paper template, the one with the single line on it. Fold it in half with the print facing you, with your thumbs pushing your spine in towards the fingers on the outside of your signature, and then get a peg and peg that on the right hand side and the left hand side, including your template. Now get your pokey tool, laying your signature on the table, put your pokey tool on that dot, on the center dot, and almost close your signature and push your awl all the way through all of the pages until it comes out right on that fold line of your signature. Do that on all 3 holes. I'm going to do this in real time so that you can get a feel for each signature as I go along. Now just release the pegs a little bit. Do not take them off. Whatever you do, don't remove them. Just lift them a little bit so you can take the template out. Now I'm going to remove the template off my fabric. You can see the holes on the inside of my fabric. I use a bookbinder's needle, but you can use whatever heavy duty needle you've got, and I'm using an embroidery floss. I had a bit of a time trying to pick what colour to use, so I've ended up just going with a colour that is the same as the decorative print on my cover. And it looks pretty good with the fabric as well. The length of thread I'm using is twice the height of my journal, plus just a itty bitty bit more. I use a needle threader because I'm using all 6 strands of the embroidery thread. Lay your signature on top of your fabric piece and open it to the very center page. Put your needle in the center hole and just come out on the outside paper part of your signature. Now put your needle through the middle hole of the last row and come out to the outside of the fabric. Now when we come up to this top hole, we've got our dots marked with a removable marker, but the hole has closed. So we're going to open it back up, get the awl and come from the inside, give it a wiggle and a poke and make way for the needle to come back through. We know where to go because we've got it marked. So just put the needle through and pull your thread through until you get this long straight stitch. Now we've got that done, all we've got to do is put the needle in through the signature. So I like to open it up a little bit, find the center, and then with the pages almost closed, put my needle in, because that's the way you pierced your hole, so the needle will find its way back through the center of the page much easier. Now we're going to skip this center hole and go all the way down the bottom and almost close the pages again and put the needle through, coming out of the paper pages, and now we're just going to finish that stitch by coming through the hole in the fabric. Now we're out on the outside again. Now we've got to come back in this hole here that's already got a stitch in it. Now when you're doing this in fabric, it's a bit tricky. So here's my tip on how to do it. Open up your signature in the center and get the thread here by the tail and the thread here on the outside and pull them both up towards the top so that you're leaving a little bit of a gape at the bottom here. Get your awl and poke it through so that it's underneath that thread. So you're making a tunnel below that thread. So now I can just slip my needle through the fresh hole I've made. Now I'm on the inside, and because I'm coming from the outside back to the center, I'm going to do exactly the same on the paper. I'm going to put my awl in the existing hole and remake it, like reopen the hole, so that it's easier for me to put my needle in without piercing the thread that's already in there. And then bring my needle in back towards the center. This really does make a difference. I've got both of my threads. Now I've got my threads to the inside. This thread belongs to the top, this to the bottom. I can pull them tight, and I only want them tight enough to make the outside stitch tight without puckering my fabric. So they could do with just a little bit more. So I'm just going to give them a gentle pull, and I've got both strings on one side. I need to have one to the left and one to the right. So I'm just going to pull this one under the long stitch, and then I tie a knot over the top of this long stitch. So before you tie your knot, you really got to pull these threads a little bit tight. But because we're using fabric, you do not pull this as tight as you would if you were using paper for the cover, or it'll crinkle up like this. Well, that's signature number 5 sewn in, and we'll get the next one ready now. So this will be the same method. We pull out the thread twice the length of our journal. Pick it up and check that it's the right way up. Open it up to the center, put your template in, put your pegs on, and punch your holes again. Remove the template without disturbing your pegs and lay your signature, making sure the pages are the right way up, on top of the signature that you've just sewn in. This is signature number 4. We're going to sew it on row number 4. Once you've got it in place, I want you to repeat the steps. Use your awl to reopen the hole in the fabric and put your needle on the inside of the signature and come out through the paper and then go through the fabric separate. Once you're on the outside, just put your needle down and re-poke the hole in the fabric. Now come back through the hole at the top here on row 4 and come back to the inside of the fabric. Once you're on the inside of the fabric, pull the thread all the way through and then put your needle in the paper signature and come back through to the inside. You don't need to worry about pulling your stitches tight just yet. Skip the middle hole, go down to the bottom hole and come out through the paper only. I'm just lengthening my thread here and using the awl to reopen my hole, and the needle will come back through to the outside. And now I'm lifting up the thread from the inside of the fabric so I can reopen the hole, and that'll leave me some space for the needle to come through from the outside and duck under this existing thread. I'm really taking my time to show you this part because I think it's important. I'm not going to go step by step through the whole 5 signatures. I'm doing these 2 signatures because I know it will help you a lot. With this one here, I'm going to put the needle in without using the awl. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but I'm still going to pull the thread up to get it out of the road, and I'm just going to use my needle. So my needle's going in under the existing thread and it comes straight through. When this happens, you can do a little happy dance and just get on with it. When it doesn't, reach for the awl and get it to help you because it really does make a difference. Now pull your stitches tight. The top tail will pull that top end of the stitch tight, and the bottom tail will pull the bottom end of the stitch tight. Don't pull them too tight or your fabric will pucker. If you leave them too loose, your signatures will wobble around inside your journal, and as you use it, it will get worse. So just get them nice and snug. If you've got 2 tails on the one side of this long thread, just get one under the right hand side and one under the left hand side and then tie your knot. Once I've done these 2 signatures, I will flip through the next 3 a lot quicker. I'll fast forward it and I'll skip some bits. I think by then you'll have the gist of what I'm doing. Bring in signature number 3. It goes in the middle, which is line number 3. Now making sure that you've got all your pages facing the right way up, repeat. Do the same again. Put your template in, punch all your holes. Make sure your pegs stay in place. Re-pierce the hole in your fabric, and starting from the inside of your signature, come out through the center, out of your signature, outside, and treat your fabric separate to your paper. Come outside, then come up through the top of the fabric to the inside, treating the paper separate again. Come through the paper to the inside, skip the center hole, come down to the bottom. Once you're on the outside of the paper, come back through the fresh hole in your fabric, and then come back from the outside, sharing the same hole you've already been through. Come back through the paper to the center of your signature. Tighten your threads. Make sure you've got one on either side of this long stitch, and then tie a knot over the long stitch to secure it. You can take your pegs off now because you've already put your stitches in your hole. It's not going anywhere. Righto, 2 left. So this is signature number 2. Turn it over so it's facing the right way up. So we're going to repeat, put the template in, punch the holes, do everything we've done on the first 3. This time you're using the second row to sew this signature in. So just go through all the steps you've just done. You should be feeling pretty comfortable by now. But whatever you do, just take your time. If it doesn't work out, pull the thread out. Start again. Don't leave it there if it's wrong. If you sew a signature in upside down, don't leave it there. Pull the threads out. There's not much work in pulling it out and doing it again. So get this signature sewn in, and then we'll grab the last one. Now it's really easy to do this one because there's only 1 row of holes left. So I'm just going to place it on the front here, and I'm going to just skip the whole process. I'm going to start sewing it in, and I'll see you when I'm tying the knot. It's all done. I've got all 5 signatures sewn in, and you can see here that the fabric has no pucker. It's laying nice and flat, and it's laying over the spine nicely. I've got my little space here on either side of the stitches, so when we put the cover on, we've got room for these signatures to grow. It's soft at the spine, yet it's still got strength. What this does is it allows the pages to open up flat. It lays on the table really flat. The gaps in between each signature are not too wide, but they're wide enough for you to be able to add things into this journal. And it's perfect for journaling in. You can write on the left side or the right side. If that's something you've noticed in some journals, they're much easier to write in on the right hand side. This one you can write on the left hand side or the right hand side, no problem. I'm cutting off my threads in the middle of the signatures. I don't want them hanging down the bottom in this journal. Before we go ahead and glue the cover onto this fabric piece, remember I used the friction pen on the fabric. You're going to love this bit. I just get my iron and I rub it gently over the top of it, and it disappears. So this is what this type of pen is what quilters use. They use it because they can just put their iron over the top of it and those marks disappear. I hope you can see it a little bit better on this shot here. So I'm just using the edge of my iron, and you only need to go over it very lightly. And those dark dots, they're now gone. For you Australian ladies, I got these pens at Officeworks. So all we've got to do now is glue the cover on. Compared to the rest of it, gluing the cover on is relatively easy. The easiest way to do it is to lay your text block on the table, grab the front fabric piece and pull it towards the right. Because your spine is so soft, it's just going to shimmy across on an angle. Then put your cardboard cover topper on top of that, level at the top and the bottom, just leaving the same gap as you've got in between each signature, right beside that stitch on the edge here. Then put a mark where the edge of your cover ends, top and bottom, and then cut off the excess. Do a test fit. Put the cover on the corner of your fabric and hold it with a peg. It's a little bit difficult to test otherwise. Now you can see a lot better what I mean by you need a gap between the stitch and the cover. Now measure between the stitch and the edge of your fabric on the front, flip it over and transfer that measurement on the back. So from the stitch out, whatever that measurement was, just use your friction pen and put a mark there and then cut the excess fabric off the back. Do another test fit just to make double sure. This is the 𝗀𝗵𝗶𝗀 fabric glue. I get this from Spotlight in Australia. I think it's best to use a fabric glue because you've got a pretty large area to put the glue around. I'm using the Kraft-Tex. This glue works really well on the Kraft-Tex. So if you're international, you could probably use the Fabri-Tac. I make sure I put a good layer all over the back of my Kraft-Tex, and then I go back around the edges, making sure that I've got some glue on the corner. But I never ever put my glue all the way out to the edge because I don't want to ruin my fabric cover by having the glue spread out and make a mess of things when I place it on. I start with the back first. It's a good way to practice. Turn your text block around so that it feels right to you. I like to put the corners to the corners. So not the spine corner, the outside of the book corner, the edge of the pages. So I start by just laying it on really, really gently first. And then I open it up and then I shimmy the fabric up towards the edge of the cover. Very gently. You can see I'm not using my fingers to press anything down heavily. I'm using an old gutted book to hold the cover up off my work table. Now I'm going to use my bone folder. It's got a flat edge on it, which is perfect for this. And I'm very gently just pressing it. I'm not even pressing it. I'm just wiping it over the fabric. And I'm doing this just for a little bit until it grabs. And I'm just having a bit of a look here. This part here is where I really need it to lay flat onto the fabric, but I'm not pressing it firm yet. This glue dries pretty quick. So now I'm coming back with the edge of my bone folder. The very end has got a beveled tip on it. And I'm just pressing it, again gently, not firm, around the edges because I don't want to squash any glue out. But I do want it to come to the very edge. I never got any glue whatsoever come through the fabric doing it this way. No glue come out or squashed out, I should say, out past the fabric or my Kraft-Tex. Now what I do is I leave it sitting on this book block here, and I just walk away. I go and find something else to do for a little bit before I come back and put the front cover on. Now I've left this to dry a fair while, I don't know, half an hour or something, and I couldn't wait any longer, so I've come back and I'm ready to put the front on. So I'm going to do exactly the same. I'm going to put my glue on the back of the Kraft-Tex, and then I'm going to place it corner to corner on the foredge of the book, and this is closer to the bottom of your screen here. Then I let the top bit just flop down, open it up, shimmy it up so it's nice and level, and I've done all this with a light hand. Then I prop it up with my text block and I go and do exactly the same as I did on the back. I gently use my bone folder, smooth all over the top, and then as it dries, I can come back and go and do it a bit firmer. But I'm going to leave this to dry. Because this is the front, I can actually close it and leave it to dry. Don't they look great? I just love the Amity Bloom design. I just made myself the green one, but then I had some requests to show how to make the text block, so I decided to make this brown one as well. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you've been following me for a while, in some ways I've been doing mostly beginner type journals. So for those of you that are ready to take the next step, maybe this one will be the one that you try next. So for now, I'll just let you enjoy the flip through, and I really look forward to hearing about the journal that you make for yourself.